It's time for Elvira's trick-or-treat tips. I said tips.
A lot of celebrities have come and gone in pro wrestling, but few have left a mark with as few appearances as Elvira has had. Elvira was a character originally meant to simply be a reboot of Vampira on a California television station, but when this didn't work out, the station sent out a casting call that was answered by an actress named Cassandra Peterson. After figuring out her new look, she was hit with a cease and desist from Vampira, and some legal issues had to be handled. After the show was given the green light, she would begin a several-decade-long run as the Mistress of the Dark. Stage shows, home videos, music albums, and any other kind of merchandise you can think of was all over the place. And it is surprising it took wrestling years instead of minutes to begin bothering her for appearances. Her first appearance to wrestling fans came during WrestleMania 2, where she was a guest commentator. Her humor and ability to not take everything too seriously made her stand out, and she was able to come off like she wasn't completely out of her depth as a broadcaster, as many celebrities do in this role. After WrestleMania, she would make the move many others would make later in the 90s, and she switched her allegiance to World Championship Wrestling, where she would promote their Halloween Havoc cards for several years.
You want big matches? Well, Elvira's got them. And so does Halloween Havoc 89.
Her ads for Halloween Havoc are still remembered, as it was one of the first times WCW had began to feel like it could get celebrity endorsements, and Elvira at the time was the perfect vehicle to use in promotion for a Halloween wrestling pay-per-view.
Whoa, Sting and Sid Vicious battled for the heavyweight title in Halloween Havoc 90, and this year it's going to be bigger and better than ever.
Cementing her place in wrestling history in the 1991 event, Elvira became the canon creator of one of the most infamous matches of all time, the Chamber of Horrors.
Oh, hello, darlings. You caught me working on my biggest project ever. For my favorite wrestling event, Halloween Havoc 91. And this year, Elvira is building a Chamber of Horrors.
Though many believe the Chamber of Horrors to be her last contribution to the wrestling world, they aren't quite correct. Along with the many other pieces of media that had been produced that actually included video games, there was a collection of comic books released, short stories of her misadventures. One such comic book happens to contain a story that extends her wrestling career a little bit longer. In January of 1995, Claypool Comics would release a comic where the Mistress of the Dark would be dragged back into the world of pro wrestling. The story begins as any good story should, with our hero showing her audience a movie of Mr. Ed discussing conspiracy theories. As she is wrapping up the movie and doing her ending dialogue, there are some pro wrestlers in the audience who begin to antagonize her, and it isn't long before the Mistress of the Dark cuts filming and wants them thrown out. As she approaches the group, she is stopped by the television station's manager and informed that she would be doing no such thing. As it turned out, the wrestlers were there to film promos for the big wrestling show on the station, and unfortunately for our hero, their ratings were far bigger than hers, and she is told that she is going to have to get over them being there. In the next panel, Elvira gets out of the shower to realize someone has taken all of her clothes, and she only has 1 minute until showtime. She grabs a potato sack and goes on stage, where she is again antagonized by the same group of pro wrestlers. This time, however, she has none of it and immediately does a plancha off the stage into the group of wrestlers. She then declares that this isn't done by a long shot and that it was officially a feud. After a short discussion in her dressing room with her assistant, she decides to hold auditions, ready to Rumble style, to find a representative to take on the champion El Lobo Loco.
What do you want, boob?
Purple sugar slush. King size.
much? That'll be $1.26.
But unlike the movie, she ran into a few people that seemed pretty familiar during her auditions. Around this time in the comic book, you may begin to pick up that the comics creators were wrestling fans. How else would you explain a mix of Stan Hansen and The Undertaker walking in to take up arms for the Mistress of the Dark? What about this extremely familiar warrior character? If you are still on the fence, perhaps the wrestler she would choose will convince you. She would choose Bruiser Brady to face off with the champion. In the next panel, we see that she and Brady are training very hard for the upcoming match, and she is certain he is going to win. It is at this point we are introduced to the pro wrestling show's announce team, and their names are Wade Water and, wait for it, Dave Seltzer. Elvira cuts a promo on the way to the ring to let everyone know why she is there and that she will be taking out the champion with the services of Bruiser Brady. The antagonists begin to shout indictments of her taste in movies, and with that, the fight was on. Bruiser Brady was overwhelmed by El Lobo Loco because he turned into a werewolf. Pro wrestling has many things in common with high school basketball. Not having a rule against werewolves is one of these similarities. Within a few panels, El Lobo Loco had dispatched Bruiser Brady. In the next panel, the station manager is seen to be elated at how much of an audience the wrestling match drew and is dead set on a rematch, feeling that it was a huge humiliation for Elvira. Clearly, the station manager is a hater. A big problem with this notion of a rematch, however, is that Bruiser Brady was completely out of commission. The station manager, showing that no executive lets injuries get in the way of making some money, has a different plan. She suggests that the Mistress of Darkness herself be the one to step in to face El Lobo Loco. At this point, we are introduced to our girls' trainer, and personally, my favorite cameo in the comic. It's none other than International Women's Wrestling Champion Skull Nakano. In the next few panels, Skull gives advice and they discuss ring psychology as well as gimmicks, showing that whoever was writing for the comic had at least a loose understanding of wrestling in 1995. At this point, we would get to see her debut, her wrestling gear, and her strategy of distracting El Lobo Loco. But she's quickly told by Skull that she will have to learn at least the basics to compete. Part of those basics is that landing on her butt is her best way to land to absorb attacks, which is not true. Over the next several panels, we are shown our hero being thrown from one end of the ring to the other by her trainer in an effort to prepare her for the champion. She takes enough punishment for Skull to assume she has the hang of it. Once that is out of the way, Bull begins to show her the ways of the foreign objects and why you should choose a wooden chair over a steel chair. When the time comes, she is led to the ring by her trainer and hasn't come empty-handed. She has brought a flamethrower with her, and she has plans to put it to use. After turning the werewolf into a barking torch, the referee steps in and disqualifies Elvira. Our protagonist points out that being a werewolf should be against the rules, but the referee points out that there is no rule discriminating against werewolves in wrestling, but there is one against flamethrowers.
He's right! Ain't no rules said the dog can't play basketball!
After the match, they are confronted by the hater who demands Elvira be fined and for yet another rematch to take place with a warning that this time she had better get it right. With everything on the line, our hero has a new plan. She will simply outrun the champion and tire him out. She does this for 55 minutes, apparently. There is a humorous dig at how many people claim to be the champion of the world thrown in here. Speaking of championships, after running around to make the El Lobo Loco tired, the Mistress of the Dark grabs the championship belt and proceeds to launch herself into the werewolf. The champion immediately crumbles and is unable to answer the count, meaning that our protagonist, Elvira. The Mistress of the Dark is the new champion of the world. She is asked how she was able to pull it off, and the foreign object training seems to have come in handy, as she knew the championship had silver plating and would take out the werewolf. In a sad turn of events, the championship was then held up by the promoter, who asked if Elvira would like to participate in their tournament, where the finals would be in a steel cage with an electric chair, barbed wire, and landmines. She declines, but doesn't leave the wrestling promotion hanging, as she volunteers the hater to take her place in the tournament, since she is always willing to do anything for the television station to get viewers. With that, the story ends. I always enjoyed it and thought it was a good Halloween-themed wrestling story to share. Elvira is still around today and has even appeared in a few more video games. All these years later, and she is still a staple of conventions and Halloween. It may surprise you, but even these days, it's not unheard of to see her still getting involved in small ways with wrestling.
The wrestlers, anyway, we're having a great time down under. He is having a really great time. Okay, I'm sorry.
But it does seem her days in the ring, illustrated or not, are in the past.
Over. Hope you had a safe, insane Halloween, and oh yeah, unpleasant dreams.